this quote-unquote Bigfoot researcher on or this Bigfoot expert on. And to be honest with you, I'm not really interested in talking to Bigfoot experts. I just don't find them very interesting. And so I've been kind of throwing around ideas for what to do for episode 200. I know there's a website called Omegle, and you can go on there, you can talk to fans, you can chat with fans, and I thought about doing something like that for episode 200. Just talking to you. I'd rather talk to you guys, to be honest with you, than have some big name on the show. I guess it's just kind of the way I roll, but I honestly would rather talk to you guys. But if you have an idea for episode 200, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. I had to kind of laugh. I was in the store the other day, and I'll give this kid a shout out. I don't even know his name. But I was walking past this kid, and he had an iPhone, he had his headphones in, and as I'm walking past him, I recognized the intro. I could hear the intro through his headphones of the show. And so I asked him, I said, "What are you listening to?" And he said, "Oh, Sasquatch Chronicles. It's a pretty cool Bigfoot show. They have witnesses on. You should check it out if you get a chance." And I just kind of laughed. I just said, "Okay, well, I'll check it out." So if you're out there listening, thanks for listening to the show. I appreciate it. I had kind of a good laugh when I walked off. Thank you again for listening to the show. And thank you guys for listening to the show. You guys are a huge part of the show, and I really do appreciate you guys listening. Tonight's going to be an interesting night. I'm going to be inviting Ronnie to the show. And Ronnie had a very fascinating encounter when he was out. He moved out to the woods here in Washington State to help his mother-in-law. And his encounter, the night of his encounter, changed his life. And it's a very, very interesting encounter. I'm also going to be welcoming Waylon to the show. Waylon is one of my favorite researchers down there with Bob Garrett in East Texas. He's one of the drone pilots down there. And Waylon gives us an update. They went to an area that the guys down there call Monkey Pond. I don't know what the real name of the place is called, but I know all the guys down there call it Monkey Pond. And when I was down there, to be honest with you, I had experiences in that area. And so I'm really looking forward to the update, looking forward to what Waylon has to say. If you get a chance, check out the website. Again, it's sasquatchchronicles.com. Shoot me an email if you've had an encounter. Again, it's wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. Ronnie, welcome to the show. Thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I was very interested in your encounter. I know it happened here in Washington State back in the early 90s. But we kind of start from the beginning on this property and tell us what you experienced.
Well, I had gone out to from Los Angeles, California, out there to help my mother-in-law. She had 30-plus acres and a couple of horses. And there's a nice little two-story house. Right off, they have a dam out there. I can't think of the name of the dam right now, but we were about maybe half a mile north of the dam, just off of a river. Maybe river was 40 yards off to the east of us. And, the night it happened, I was asleep. I was totally asleep. And what caught my attention while I was sleeping was I started feeling a trembling. The house was shaking. I didn't know if there were earthquakes in Washington, but here in California we have earthquakes. So if I feel any kind of jolt, I'm going to take notice. I don't care if it's a huge truck coming down the street or not. I'm going to take some notice. As I'm sleeping, the house is shaking, and I don't know, in my subconscious, I'm thinking, what's going on here? Why is the house shaking? Are we getting ready to have an earthquake? So I'm coming around a little bit, getting concerned, like getting prepared, and I feel it again. The house shakes again, and I'm, wow, this is, because we're out in the middle of nowhere, basically, and this goes on a couple of more times. Now I'm waking up. I'm saying, okay, wake yourself up. Get ready for this. Get ready to get under the doorway, whatever emergency step you need to take. I'm living with my mother-in-law. She has a Doberman also. She stays downstairs. I'm upstairs. I'm at the 12 o'clock. My room, I have a window that's about 12 o'clock. Her window is at 2 o'clock, just under me. As I'm coming out of it, I hear a breathing, heavy breathing. And I'm laying there, and I sleep with my firearm. So I'm thinking, now, not an earthquake, something is by the house. So I come out of my sleep, and I'm listening now. I'm paying attention, laying on my back, and I'm paying attention, but it doesn't sound like a person breathing. It sounds like game, like big game. I'm thinking bear, moose. That's what they have out there. I've never been out there before. I've never been that rural before. And I feel it. I hear it, actually. It's moving. But the way that it's moving, it's not moving. It's not making a sound like a bear would. It's not dragging, and it's not breathing like that. So I'm thinking, well, what the hell? Maybe one of the horses got out of the stable. Let me get up and take a look and see. Before I even get up to take a look and see, it gets right up under my window, and I'm listening to the breathing now, and I'm saying, this is not the horses. This isn't it must be a bear. Now I'm alert, very alert, and I can hear my mother-in-law snoring. She snores like a lumberjack. The third time she let off a set of snores, something else snored right after she did it. At that point, I kind of freaked out a little bit. The hair on my arms, I was alert. My whole body, all the hair was standing straight up, and my heart's racing. And I'm thinking, bears don't do this. What the hell? So I crawl. Instead of getting out of my bed, you know how you regularly get out of the bed the sideways. I go down to the foot of the bed. I get out because whatever it is right under my head. It sounds like it's just right under my head. When I get out of the bed and I go to take steps to my window to look, something says, like somebody's in the room with me. I just hear a voice that says, you don't want to see. You don't go. Don't go. Clearly. And I got my firearm. I shrugged it off as soon as I heard it. No sooner than I heard it, I shrugged it off. I went to the window, and I looked down, and I'm looking around, and I don't see anything. And I look towards my mother-in-law's window, and I say, shit, when did we get a tree there? We don't have a tree here. And I'm looking again, and I'm noticing the tree has a form. And it looks like it's up against the wall being arrested, but it's looking down in her window. And it's snoring like her, mimicking her. And my jaw drops because as a young child, I've read the books. I've seen the movies. I was into cryptozoology, oceanography. I phased out of it because I thought that this stuff was never going to go anywhere. They're not going to tell us anything. So I'm looking at this thing. Immediately, I know what it is. But I can't believe what I'm looking at. And this thing, I mean, I've heard people say they were 10 feet away from this thing. Well, I was 8 feet away from this damn thing. It was huge. If it wanted to, it could have came to my window and put its hands, its fingertips on my windowsill. As I'm looking, I want to get a better look. So I go to take a step into the window more, and the floor makes this creaking sound. And this thing turns, and it looks right up at me. I'm looking at it, but I can see the form. And I'm trying to see because I'm looking right in, I'm thinking I'm looking right in its eyes. It went from a black silhouette, to all I saw was white. It had opened its mouth and let out, I don't know if it was a purr or a growl. It was so smooth. It wasn't rough. It was smooth, low, very smooth, and heavy. And I fell backwards. While I'm down on my butt, I'm backing into a corner because I think I'm discombobulated. I'm saying no, 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 no way. But it's there. And all I can say is no, no. No, this is not, you're not seeing this. No, this is something out of a book. This is, I'm not the person to see this. I backed into a corner. I couldn't look at that window anymore. I was afraid to look at the window. I was afraid to breathe, and I kept trying to be calm, but my heart wouldn't stop. It was like my heart was like in an amplifier, and I can hear it all the way through the house. It wouldn't stop. I don't know where my gun was. I think I dropped it on the floor when I fell back. It was the last, because I didn't think that was going to do anything, and I kept saying, please, please don't let this thing get in the house, because I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't think I can do anything. I'm talking to myself. I'm trying to reason with myself. At the same time, this is what I just saw. It's not a dream, and I thought, I'm going crazy. This is crazy. I didn't hear anything else after I backed away into that corner. I couldn't hear anything. I didn't see anything anymore. And I remember saying to myself, just stay up. It'll be sunlight in a few more hours. And then I'll go out and I'll see what's going on here. I remember finally passing out that morning. I think it was about 7 o'clock in the morning. I passed out. I felt safer with the sun being up for some strange reason. People are scared of the dark, so you feel a lot safer in the light. When I got up that morning, I was so exhausted and my mind was just running in circles about what just happened. And should I tell my mother-in-law this? I was praying this thing didn't. Should I go downstairs and wake her up? I didn't know what to do. Now, we have a Doberman. I didn't hear that Doberman. I didn't hear the Doberman at all. In 48 hours, I was out of that place. I went to work later that day, and one of my coworkers, he was just like, you don't look the same. At that time, I was doing customer service on the phone. I couldn't talk to anybody. I ended up leaving early that day from work, but a coworker noticed that I guess I was a little razzled, and I explained to him that I wasn't happy staying out there on that farm, and he had an extra room. And in 48 hours, I was off of that property. Now, when I left that property, I got back into my regular routine again. I put all of this on the back of my mind, on the back burner. I didn't like sleeping after this either. It was hard to sleep, so I would just stay up until I passed out, because when I was first going to sleep, all I was seeing was this image over and over and over. And I don't know if you've ever been asleep before, and then it's like you just had the daylight scared out of you, but you're asleep, and you're just kind of freaking out, panicking. That's how I was going to sleep. I would wake up in cold sweats. My ex-wife was telling me why. She would ask me, why are you gritting your teeth? And I didn't understand why. I just didn't want to see that again when I closed my eyes. It took about 20-something years for it to come back around. Like I said, I found your show one night. I was doing some investigating on the internet, and I found your show, and I listened, and I was listening to some of the people, and I said, oh my gosh, that sounds like something that happened to me. That's what it did to me. And so I continued to listen for a year or so, and I would hear story after story of something that kind of pertained to me, and I just said, wow, I know how these people feel. I started talking about it a little bit with my ex-wife, my mother-in-law. I explained, she laughed at me. Oh, no, stop it. You're just dreaming, or you're just, jealous. And I was serious, but, you know, I didn't take it to heart when they laughed at me. And because I know what I saw, before I saw what I saw, I always knew they existed. Now, I didn't think they were that damn big. Like I said, we didn't have a tree there. That thing was big. It looked like a tree.
They're huge. These things are huge. I wanted to ask you, how big would you say it was?
Oh my gosh. That thing had to be 8+ feet tall, 8.5 feet tall, because it had to stoop down to look into her window. And with the way that the arms were positioned, like as if a police officer asked you to put your hands against the wall, its arms were at the elbow was probably 1.5 feet, 2 feet above the top of the windowsill.
It's interesting you mentioned the mimicking. I had a hunter one time tell me he woke up. He didn't want to come on the show because he didn't actually see it. But he woke up in the middle of the night and he told me he snores it's like a chainsaw, and he's well aware of it. And when he woke up middle of the night, he heard it sounded like a huge creature snoring towards him.
Yeah.
And he didn't know what to make of it. He really had no clue what to make of it. It wasn't like any other animal he heard.
No.
It's almost like it was kind of copying him snoring, and it really threw this guy off.
Yes, yeah.
How long were you in this property before this happened?
I was on, and here's the funny part. I was on this property probably going on maybe 6 or 7 months. I told you we had horses. I didn't understand until later on. There were several instances where I went to feed the horses. The horses are probably, I'll say, 75 yards out away from the house. As I'm going to feed, I remember the first time I did it. I was going out. It was probably 6:30-ish in the evening, and we have a long driveway. Our driveway is probably, 120 yards long. So I'm going up this driveway to the stable to feed the horses. I get about 20 yards, and that same voice that I heard that night when I looked out the window, it said, "Don't go. Go back." Out of nowhere, the hair on my arm stood up again. I freaked out. This is all before I even had the experience with the creature looking out the damn window. I couldn't figure it out. I turned around and I went back and I said, okay, I'll feed the horses in the morning. I don't know why I listened to that instinct, but I did. On the way back, I'm looking like why would, something tell me that? I'm looking around. I don't see anything, so I go back in the house. A few days later, I go back out again to feed the horses. And I, like I said, I always carry my firearm with me. I'm doing it again, and I hear the voice again. And I've never had this happen to me so many times in a row before. I mean, I've been in some sticky situations before growing up in South Central LA. This was up there with them. It's a sick feeling, a queasy feeling, but you don't see or you don't hear. I don't see or I don't hear anything. And I listened to the sound in my head, and I turned and I went back in the house. Now I'm in the house, and I'm watching television. The house has about 180-degree angle with nothing but glass. We always keep the curtains open. Since I've been there, we kept the curtains open. I've never had any reason to close the curtains or to feel uncomfortable. I had been watching TV a few times in the living room downstairs, and I had gotten the most uncomfortable feeling. I know what it feels like when someone's staring at you, and that's what it felt like, but I couldn't see anything. And I had this happen to me, I don't know, maybe a dozen times, and I started closing the curtains. But there's still a window in the kitchen that there's I don't know, about maybe 10 feet long and about 4 feet high. I felt like I was still being watched. I could never figure it out until I started talking about this with my ex-wife. And she said, I believe that thing was watching you. And I said, you know what? You're probably right. That's why I felt the way that I felt, and I couldn't explain it. It all continued until that night, and I actually saw this thing, and I couldn't see the eyes. The face was like a flat, shiny leather or vinyl. I couldn't see any ears. I could see the fingers. I could see the legs. I could see the whole body, everything but the eyes and the nose. And it was right there. And then when it opened its mouth to let out that sound, all I saw was white. I mean, the mouth on that damn thing was, it could have bit my arm off. That thing was huge. I feel very lucky that I guess I made it that far, because I say to myself, what would have happened had I bypassed those voices and gone to feed the horses? I hear about these rural disappearances now, and I say, wow, I could have been one of those statistics.
Was it kind of your gut talking to you, telling you?
It was. Yeah. And I know what it sounds like when my gut tells me something, and when your conscience tells you something, it's a little different.
Yeah, and I've experienced that too. I mean, I've been out hunting and, kind of had that little voice on your shoulder telling you there's something around, and all of a sudden a cougar pops out. I think it's something within us to kind of protect us. Yeah. And it's good to listen to that voice. It's good to, your gut is usually right. You usually never go wrong listening to your gut, because it'll tell you.
You got that right.
You probably knew walking out feeding those horses that it was really close by. Did your mother-in-law, did she ever experience anything further on that property after you left?
I asked her, and she didn't. She said no. She said, oh, you're just, that's hogwash, basically. And, she's kind of a mountain woman herself, and that's why she picked that area, because she lived in a nice place out in San Fernando Valley. She's in Tarzana, and she left from Tarzana, to a ranch to raise horses. She's kind of a mountain woman, Doesn't really need a guy. She can go out and milk and do everything, throw the hay around herself. But I just figured I'd go and give her a hand, and that's what I get. Yeah, that was that was an experience, I would say, of a lifetime. I would never want to do that again. If I would never want to go through that again. And I don't know how people say that, oh, I was in my tent and I heard it go by and I'm just going to stay. I'm gone as soon as I can get a break. As soon as I get a lane to get out of there. It took me 48 hours. I was out of that place. And I slept on the floor, mind you, for those 2 days. I didn't sleep in my bed because I just didn't feel comfortable. I slept in a corner for 2 days.
Yeah, no, I hear you. And I always wonder, too, people like your mother-in-law, if kind of ignorance is bliss. I've talked to some of those folks that live way out like that, and they tend to brush things off. They don't really want nothing. I don't know if it's that they don't want to know it exists. I don't know what it is. But sometimes with those people, especially older folk,
yeah.
they tend not to want to, because I guarantee that wasn't the first time that creature came up to that window.
When you put it like that, it's a great possibility. I hear people say they pass through areas and such. I don't know, but wow, I think you're right. Yeah, I'm so glad I left that place. And a few months after that, she ended up getting a place a little bit further up north in Stevens County. And I did go back there. I helped her move there because it was more of a, like, I guess a little community. The houses were kind of close-knit together. But yeah, I'll never go back to that 9 Mile Fall Ranch again. Oh, my gosh.
Well, that would have scared me. That whole thing would have scared me.
I talk about it now. It's a lot easier to talk about it. Before then, I had no one to discuss it with. And I kind of, like I said, I was having sleeping issues. So me and my ex-wife, we went for counseling to see what's going on. And finally I broke down and I told her, this is something that I think could be why. And when I explained to them, they were like, well, that just sounds like a bad nightmare. And think of pleasant things before you go to sleep. And I'm like, yeah, good luck with that. You didn't see what I saw. You didn't have the experience I had. So it's easier said than done. And like I said, I just wanted to black out. I didn't want to dream when I went to sleep. I didn't want to dream because all I could see was that over and over and over again. And I would just sit up. I would go to work tired. I started, sleep deprivation. I'm not hungry. It took a toll on me for what I saw and got away with there. But, yeah, that thing was huge, thick. I couldn't believe it. And I would never, ever, if I was walking through the forest, think to look that high up, to look up like that. I thought they were, people say, oh, they look like a man. So I'm looking for something, 5, 6 feet tall, if I am looking. And, and when I thought I was being looked at through the windows, someone was staring at me. If I did look at it, I was probably, if I, was looking that way, could only see a stomach, but didn't even know because it's pitch black out there. So, I'm just dumbfounded by the size of these things. It was amazing.
Yeah, it is amazing to see firsthand. And PTSD is pretty common. I'm sure you said you've been listening to the show, and one thing I'm sure that you pick up on really quick, Ronnie, is that PTSD is real. A lot of people suffer from it. And even a lot of times when you don't have really an aggressive encounter, where you don't feel like you just see it like roadside crossings, you'd be surprised. Even a lot of those people still have PTSD from it. I've talked to many witnesses where they're in their car, they see it across the road, and then they can't sleep for 8 months. Their sleep patterns. And I think it's really when you see something so out of your range of what you know, it's so out there. It's like, I'm sure you went through this because I went through it and a lot of other witnesses did, but you start to second guess yourself. You're like, God, did I go crazy? Was I dreaming? And then the real answer is no, you weren't dreaming, and no, you're not going crazy.
Of course.
But deep down, you try to find an answer for it. It almost feels better to go, I must have been dreaming. Yeah.
Because that night, all I kept, I was babbling, no, hell no. I know I didn't just see what I saw, but I know I saw it. I think for, I don't know, maybe about 30 to 40 minutes, all I can say was no.
How was the creature proportioned? Was it proportioned like a man or like a gorilla, or how would you describe it?
Oh, my gosh. I would say like a barrel chest. It had a barrel chest. The legs were long, thick. I don't know. They had to be like, I've seen 24-inch guns on dudes in my neighborhood. So these legs had to be 48, 50. They were thick legs. The arms were thick. The arms were, when it turned to look at me, it did turn its upper body, not its lower body. The lower body was still facing my mother-in-law's window, it just turned at the hips and looked up. The arms, when it did that, came down, and the left arm was down by the knee, the left knee. I would say maybe, I don't know, about maybe a foot past the left knee. It was like crouching a little, like not crouched, but stooped, a quarter stoop. The hair, there was no neck. It was just a head, a body, arms, and legs. And the hair, I would say probably 3-4 inches long. I could see the hair on it. On the face, I didn't see any hair. Like I said, it looked like a flat black vinyl. I would say it looked more like a gorilla, a huge gorilla. It didn't look like a man. It didn't look like a man at all. It looked like a huge gorilla, like, I don't know, an 8-foot tall gorilla.
And they're kind of, I always say they're kind of proportioned like a cartoon. Just everything.
That's what it looked like. When the hand came down, the left hand, the hand was actually like, not with the palm out, but the palm back. It looked like something out of Scooby-Doo. It looked like something out of Scooby-Doo or something. One of the characters, how they like slouch over and they have this pose. The knees were bent. The left arm was down at its side, but the palm was up, not out. The right side, I couldn't really see too much because the way that it had turned itself, it was like a 180. It did a 180, and so I couldn't see that whole right side. It was huge. The only word I can describe was huge. Intimidating. If it wanted to come in the house, I think it would have had to rip like the doorway open some. I don't think it was going to come in that doorway without tearing the doorway up.
Yeah,
that was my way of, I guess, rationalizing that night. That thing is too big to come in here. It's too big to. I mean, if it wanted to come in, it could come in, but it's going to have to tear that doorway up to get in here.
Yeah, and a lot of people listening, they don't realize how terrifying it is to see something that big. I mean, gosh, I've come across guys that were 6'8", 6'9", very, very large men, very intimidating. But they're like schoolgirls compared to these creatures. I mean, there's no comparison, zero comparison. And it's really hard. It's very, very hard to explain to someone the fear of, I'm sure a million things are racing through your mind, everything from, if this thing wanted to come in here, there's really nothing I can do about it. There's really absolutely, I can empty my 8 rounds into this thing and it's probably just going to piss it off.
Basically, yeah.
It's interesting. I mean, they drop in the gun. I mean, I try not to talk too much about my encounter because I'll make it about the guest, but you forget you have a freaking gun in your hand, or it's the last.
Oh my gosh!
It seems
that
like
was the last thing I was worried about.
Yeah, doesn't it seem like it would be the first thing on your mind? Like, keep this weapon on me, and but you go.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, you go into this weird thing where it's like you tend to even forget you even had a gun. I mean, it's kind of like, well, listen.
Yeah. I used to bow hunt with my dad, and we would, hunt buck up in the hills out here in San Dimas. And there was one time I had first gone hunting. I was an amateur. And we were bow hunting. And he had placed me on the side of a trail and told me sit still, and he's going to go over another little slope there and sit still and wait for something to come down the trail. I'd never done this before. So I'm sitting down in some bushes. It's, 4:30 in the morning. I'm not used to this, but I'm giving it a try. And I remember something coming up that hill. I've never seen a deer close up. I've never seen really many animals other than a dog and cat close up. So as this deer is coming up the trail, I'm freaking out, and I'm thinking, I don't want to shoot this thing. And it's too close. And, you know, I ended up anyway dropping my bow and leaving my position and running. I never got scolded so bad, though. And then my mom, when I got home, she's like, you know, your dad told me what you did, and you're never supposed to drop your weapon when you're out there. That's, you know, what saves your life. You know, that's, you know, your lifesaver. That always stayed on my mind. And I couldn't believe I dropped it again, but I didn't care. At that point, I was dumbfounded, you know, and really that firearm was the last thing I was thinking about. The only thing I could think was, I just don't want this thing to come in here. If this thing comes in here, it's all over. I'll do the best I can, but it won't be much. I mean, I'm scared, but I've been in situations for my life. I'll fight, but wow, there was nothing I could do.
Yeah.
There was nothing I could do.
Yeah, and don't feel too bad about...
This thing wanted to come in there.
Yeah, and don't feel too bad about dropping your gun. I mean, your whole frame of reference just got blown up. You know, it's everything you thought was real and wasn't real just got thrown out the window. And so a lot of people do go in shock. I mean, I've talked to some very, very experienced hunters that have been sitting in tree stands and have seen them and just kind of sit there in a weird frozen state of shock for hours, even after the creature's already left. And they'll get down and say, I was too scared. I didn't even realize I had my gun on me. My rifle on me. And so, I mean, it really does blow your frame of reference out of the water when you see these things, and it's terrifying. Even if they aren't aggressive, they're terrifying because of their size. You realize there's absolutely nothing. You're at their mercy. If they want you, they're going to get you, and there's really nothing you can do about it.
I can believe that. And then, you know, through these, I hear they like the being by lakes and rivers. Well, there's a lake not too far from us, maybe, I don't know, a couple of miles to the west of us, just under Stevens County there. And then we had the dam there that runs into, you know, Spokane, downtown Spokane. So I don't know. I guess it could have been following that. But it did show up that night, and yeah, I'm good. I'm good for the rest of my life. That was something. That was something to behold.
Yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. Well, Ronnie, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show and listening to the show. It does help to kind of hear other people tell their encounters, doesn't it?
It does a lot. Believe it. It's been therapy for me. I don't feel so singled out now, alone. I don't feel like I have to stay isolated in myself and can't share this with anyone. Yeah, it helps me a lot. Yeah, I just, because I felt like a turd in a punch bowl. I had no one to talk to.
Well, I appreciate it, and I appreciate you coming on and sharing it. Hopefully your encounter will help someone else. And it's like I always say, these things are out there. It's, you know, some people think this is entertainment, but it's really not. These things are out there, and people need to be aware of it because you never know what they're going to do. You never know their intentions. The one you ran into, who knows what it was doing? Maybe it was coming up, looking for entertainment, just seeing what was going on in the house. May not have really been meant any sort of aggression, but that's neither here nor there. People need to know that these things are out there, and I can't thank you enough for coming on and sharing it with the audience, Ronnie, very much. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Wes. I greatly appreciate it, and thanks for listening to me. I greatly appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man. Thank you for being on. And let's go to East Texas with one of her favorite researchers, Waylon. Waylon, thanks for coming on tonight.
Oh, pleasure to be here as always, Wes. I appreciate you having me on.
And I was pretty interested in the encounter you guys had the other night. As I was telling you, I mean, I had my own experiences out there in what the boys down in Texas call Monkey Pond. But if you would, kind of just tell us what happened when you guys were out there.
Well, Bob and Tim and I got out there about 2:30 in the afternoon, and you know where this place is. It's pretty much in the middle of nowhere. It's actually pretty difficult, or it can be difficult to get into if there's been any rain. We haven't had a lot of significant rainfall, but we did end up encountering a little bit of mud. It's behind a locked gate. You have to have a pass from the Forest Service to actually access the area. So we got the pass, and the gate is a combination lock, and we opened the lock and drove down in there. And once you get to the gate, it's another mile and a half actually down to the campground where the pond is. There are 2 campgrounds there. It's pretty much primitive camping. There's no facilities at all, nothing else. It's just trees and a pond, and there's a little rundown boat dock or fishing pier that kind of goes out into the lake, and that's it. The Lone Star Trail actually comes in on the northwest side, comes into that area, and then it goes through and continues on. That area of the trail is very rarely used. It's barely even navigable anymore. They still keep the markers up, but the trail itself is actually pretty overgrown in that spot. And it's always been a hot spot for the group. Honestly, like I said, you've been there. I think Shannon and your girlfriend were there with Brandon, I think.
I'll tell you what happened to us real quick before you tell us what happened to you. I know Bob Garrett and Tim Sermons, Mo, all those guys, that was the first night we were out there. And we went to, the guys call it Monkey Pond. I don't know what the real name of it is. But when we were down there, and that's what threw me off when I heard what happened to you guys, it was Brandon, Garrett, Bob's son, Shannon, and my girlfriend. We heard, the only way I can describe it, it sounded very female-like, and it sounded pissed. And this thing was going off. I mean, when I say going off, this thing was going off. And I remember I was looking at everyone else in the group, and I was like, we should probably head back to camp. Because I was thinking, Jesus, if we run into this thing, we're in trouble. I mean, it sounded like a female Sasquatch just pissed off. And it went on for like 20 minutes. I mean, this creature went off for like 20 minutes. My eyes were cartoon size, and I was there, and, I was kind of worried. At first, I was worried about the wild hogs. I've had this fear of running into wild hogs down there because I've heard so many bad things about them. And everything went out the window. I mean, I wasn't worried about anything but running into this thing. But I don't mean to take up the time. But what happened to you guys when you were down there?
Well, we got there and kind of did a walk around back to the north. There's another small pond there. There's an old cattle corral there, an old cattle pen with a loading chute that's all run down. And there's a kind of an easement that goes through for fence work. And so we kind of walked down that. We looked for any trackways that we could find, just kind of getting the lay of the land a little bit, because I had never been there before. This is my first time out. Right about, I guess probably around 3:30 in the afternoon, the weird thing is that all of this shooting started around us. And the shooting did not stop until dark. It sounded like a gun range. There were pistol shots, shotgun sounds going off. What sounded to me, being in the Marine Corps for so long, I know what 5.56 sounds like. So there was a lot of what was probably AR fire going on, and it was just constant. Tim had ended up leaving at about 4:00. He had to get home, and so that just left Bob and I there. And we got in there. I have my old venerable Hummer H2 I call the Bigfoot buggy. So using it, I was able to get into that area, even though it was pretty soggy. And there's only one road going into the campsite that we were at. There's no way out. Once you go down that road and you park in that camp spot, there's really no going anywhere else unless you want to go into 25 or 30,000 acres of nothing, which would be to the northwest. So we parked there. We backed in with the nose of the truck pointing back down the road so we could get out quick if we needed to. We didn't really have much of a campfire. I hadn't eaten, so I did start a small fire, and I had some basically some MRE-like food, boiled in the bag, chicken and rice that I threw on. And I boiled some water and cooked that, and then I put the fire out. And the shooting kept going pretty much nonstop. Also, there was a sound of someone driving up and down the road about 1.5 miles away with the radio playing really, really loud. They just kept going back and forth up and down the road. And again, this is private access here. Nobody's supposed to be back there but us. We're the only ones that had a permit, and there was nobody else in the campground. At dark, all of that ceased. And then we started to get vocals of the females. And there was more than one, and the vocals that they were making was just a really long woo sound, just woo, really long, really loud, really powerful. And that is, according to Bob, that is females in distress. So when they cut loose making those sounds, which would have been to the west of us, shortly thereafter from the east, we started hearing returns. And they were different, almost more like the kind of thing that everybody gets. I don't know, the Ohio moan, I guess, is what they call it.
Yeah.
We got vocals that were like that, and pretty much Bob said, well, there's the males responding. If the females are in distress, the males are in distress. So the guys are basically coming back to see what's going on. About 30 minutes later, it's nice and dark by this time. Bob and I are just sitting by the truck. We have the microphone out. Bob has his recorder out. We do have his night vision. And from down the trail back toward the north, down the edge of the pond, we got a really heavy stomp, really, really heavy thud on the pine needles, which, Bob will tell you basically it's posturing. It's a challenge. They want to see how you're going to react. We didn't really get any vocals at that point. It got really quiet, but we did start to hear some movement behind us. And it was really subtle, just that subtle sound of, a stick breaking every now and then, or just kind of something moving through the brush. I don't know if that was a Sasquatch or not at that point, but when we heard the thud and saw nothing down the trail, that kind of thought, okay, well, maybe there's one there. He came in, he's checking out what's going on. So we sat, and we didn't hear anything. We had heard some owl calls in broad daylight. We had heard some barred owl calls, no chatter, no laughter, none of the monkey talk or anything else. But we did hear some barred owl calls earlier in the day when the sun was still up, which is a little odd for this region. And then I picked up what Bob actually thought. He was like, was that your stomach? And I'm like, no. It was actually from the other side of the truck. Say we were probably 50 feet from the tree line where we were sitting, and we were sitting by the lake. And he was like, was that your stomach? And I said, no, that was not my stomach. And it was a nice, long, guttural sound. So at that point, basically, I turned my Q-beam on, and I start looking at the tree line back there.
Now, when you say Q-beam, explain to the audience what that means.
It's basically just a handheld LED light. It's a 3-lamp LED. Pretty much, I want to say this one's probably around 1,600 lumens. So it's bright. It'll light up, 100 yards easily in any direction. So I'm kind of scanning the tree line, looking back down the trail, and immediately, as soon as I turn that light on, the lake is probably around 100 yards wide, maybe a little wider at one point. Across from us, not the campsite that's on the opposite side of the lake, but where the road comes in, we heard this really heavy splash. And what it was a log being thrown into the water. And immediately, Bob threw the night vision up. He looked for a second and basically said, we got to go. We got to go. Did everything. We got to get out of here. We got to go. And I said, what are you seeing? He said, there's 5. He said, there are 5. They're standing right next to each other on the opposite bank by the road, watching us. So at that point, we started getting everything together. We traveled pretty light. Threw everything in the truck. We took the microphones down off the trees, packed up the recorder, and we got in the truck and we hightailed it out of there. And we were scared. Bob will tell you he was scared. He said 5 of them together like that. He said they looked like males, just from the way that they carried themselves and the girth. They probably thought that we were the ones down there doing all the shooting and distressing the females. They threw the log in the lake to see how we were going to respond, I guess, to see if we were going to start shooting at them. Is the only thing that I can think of. But yeah, basically he said they were standing there like a street gang. And I haven't seen Bob that nervous so far. But when Bob Garrett is uneasy, you should probably be uneasy. So I became uneasy at that point, even with a tactical shotgun loaded with a double alt buck, 15 rounds of double alt buck. I was starting to get concerned as well. So I said, if Bob says we need to go, we need to go. And so we did. We had to pass by right where they were standing, but when we drove by, they weren't there. Our fear was that they may try to cut us off from getting back across that causeway. If they pushed a tree down or threw a log across that narrow road there, as muddy as it was, there's no way to go around it without either going down a 30-foot embankment into the water or on the backside or going down into the water. So you're kind of threading your way through there. And then we had to make it back up to the main road, and we had to open the gate. So I got out and opened the gate. Bob got out and covered me. And then I pulled the truck through, and then I got out and covered him while he closed and locked the gate back behind us in case they came up behind us, and we got out of there. So it was a pretty interesting night. That was the second time in a month that I've been run out of the woods by Sasquatch. I'm starting to get a little tired of it, but I'm sure it won't be the last time. So.
Well, like I was saying, you and I were talking about, if Bob's nervous, that's a good time for you to probably be nervous, because I've seen the guy in action. There's not much that shakes him up. And you're right. It makes you wonder if they were going off because of the gunfire. One thing I can tell you when I was there, that was the first night I was in Texas, and we went down to Monkey Pond. It sounded like a female demon just screaming her lungs off and just going off. And so, I know they're in the area. We could hear them from different directions when we were there. I got to send you guys my damn camera so you guys can record the audio and the video when you guys see stuff like that. I realized it probably wasn't the first thing on your guys' mind. Hey, let's get evidence of this. It was probably more or less, like you said, a street gang, time to go.
Yeah, we were only, 100 or so yards away, which they could cover extremely quickly. And if they boxed us in, even if they didn't try to take us out, they could have made a really long and miserable night. And really, nobody knew where we were except for Tim. So, and I guess maybe, Bob's family members might have known, but I didn't really tell anybody where I was going. So it could have been a long, arduous night. And with 5, maybe 6, I mean, there's just, if they decide to be aggressive, I mean, you just have no chance. I don't care what you're armed with. They're just too fast. And it's such close quarters there that they'd be on you before you could do much. And we'd be lucky to take down 2. We'd probably be lucky to take down 1. And then it would be over. So it's just no point tempting fate at that point. But we did get some good recording of it, some good audio that Bob is working through right now. So hopefully we'll have that to listen to. But yeah, the shooting that was going on before, Bob and I are sitting there, and there's nobody that lives out here. There's nobody out here. And the driving up and down the road with the radio, maybe it could be a hunters. I don't know. But whatever it was, they definitely got them stirred up. And it was, to me, it was almost like somebody is either trying to make a statement to keep them here, maybe not coming by their house or something, because we could hear a dog barking in the distance. So maybe there's a homestead back there that I don't know about. or they're stirring them up on purpose, one of the two. So I don't know what to think about it, but it was really strange. And all the times that Bob has been out there camping with his family and things like that in the past, and that you guys were out there, he had never heard anyone shooting like that. So that was odd.
Yeah, that is odd. It's pretty remote, too. That whole area is pretty remote. I guess for the audience, kind of the way you described it, Waylon, you drive in there, and there is a gate. I would imagine you guys opening that gate and closing it was probably the longest 2 minutes of your life, or minute and a half of your life. But you open this gate, and then it's one road in, and basically there's one road out. And so, yeah, there's not really, that's strange that people were in there shooting, because you're right, you need to get a permit, you need to open the gate, you need to go in there, and it's very remote. It's a very remote location.
And it's really beautiful. I mean, I can see why they hang out in that area. They've got everything they need. There's a lot of hog sign there. There's a lot of deer there. There's a lot of, actually, duck also that hang out in the pond there. I saw 2 ducks there before dark, before they went to roost. So it's a pristine area, absolutely beautiful. The water's clear and clean, and it's just not used that much. I may know why it's not used that much now. I don't know, but that was my first time being there. And like I said, it's pretty much, it's a drive to get out there, and if you can't get back out that road and you're forced to go overland, I mean, it's a long way. It's a long way into even thicker forest to try to get to the next main road, which is about 12.5 miles away. So you're kind of screwed if you make a mistake there. And if we'd had 4 or 5 guys with us, it would have been different. Yeah, with just the 2 of us, there's just, there's no point in getting crazy. I mean, we know they exist. I don't need anyone to prove it to me. So, but yeah, it was pretty unnerving. Like I said, we didn't waste any time getting out of there. We definitely left with a purpose.
Yeah, no, I love that area. You're right. It's very remote. If I was a Sasquatch, that's probably where I would hang out. It'd be nice to get your drone in the air and fly it around at night, because once it gets dark there, we got a lot of activity when we were there. And I don't really understand, our situation, what set that female off. I can tell you she was pissed. It was like nothing I'd ever heard before in my life. And it was almost every time she screamed, it sounded like a banshee just screaming. It was so powerful, it would go through you. And so, yeah, it's a great area. It's a great area. I wish I could have been there. I'm glad you guys made it out safe, though. And like I always say, if old Bob's nervous, that's probably a good cue to leave at that point, because, like I said, there's not much that shakes him up.
Yeah, we'll definitely be going back. There's another area that Mo and I are going to go look at next week. And I actually have a neighbor that lives about three miles from me where I am now that I just randomly ran into her at the store and started talking to her. And she's moved into this place about 6 months ago. Our property backs up to about 3,000 acres of private land. It's all wooded. The landowners don't even live there. There's not even a structure on the property. But there are 2 really nice lakes there. And she's got 2 boys, a 14-year-old and a 5-year-old. She's actually a skeptic, to be honest. But I played her some audio, and she told me that she had heard some of those sounds at night, along with the coyotes going off around here. But she said one night something did slap the house, and something hit the house so hard it shook the windows. And her 14-year-old son grabbed the pistol and went outside to look, but didn't see anything. And I told her, well, that that's one of the things that they do, is they'll slap the side of the house to try to get someone to come outside or see what reaction they can get. And she got very afraid at that point. So Bob and I are going to go check out that place. The 5-year-old said that he saw a bear in the woods standing on its hind legs. So I don't know. It's worth at least going to check out. If nothing else, we can hopefully let her know if one's been in there, if one's coming through there. They actually painted the windows on one side of the house completely white that faced the woods. they painted all the windows white with a paintbrush because they felt like they've been being watched. So that's probably going to be next on the agenda for Bob and Tim and I to get out there and at least maybe help her sleep better at night or tell her what she can do to try to keep these things, if that's what it is, if it's not a creepy neighbor coming through, is what to do. So it's pretty interesting. So we'll see. And that's only about 2 miles from my house as the crow flies. So I'm like, all right.
Keep me up to date. Let me know what happens with that. I'd love to have you back on to talk about it. It's like I always say, I highly doubt it's a creepy neighbor, especially out there in Texas. It's one of the few places where I think it's legal to actually just shoot someone if they look at you wrong.
Pretty much.
And so you don't want to.
Pretty much. If they're around your house or on your property after dark.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's pretty much shoot first and ask questions later.
Yeah. So I highly doubt it's a neighbor. But I appreciate you coming on and sharing the experience with the audience. And
you could probably get old Bob back on as well. I'm sure he has a lot more to add than I do. He's been under the weather a little bit with his allergies, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind expounding on just what I got, on my side of it. I'm sure he probably has more information because he's better at listening for a lot of the subtleties that I'm still learning to listen for.
Well, I appreciate it, brother. Thank you for being here.
Oh, you're welcome. I appreciate it, and say I love the show. Glad you're feeling better. You sound a whole lot better.
Oh yeah, no, I'm starting to feel better, and it's one of those long colds that are drawn out. It's beat me up. I've been pretty much at its mercy for about 3 weeks, and I'm just now starting to feel better. But I appreciate it, man. Thank you for noticing.
No problem, man. I hope to see you. Hope to see you back down here.
Yeah, I can't wait. I'd love to come back down.
All right, sounds good, brother. Thanks for having me on, Wes.
Thanks, Waylon. And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. I'll see you guys next time. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Friday night. For those of you who have the weekend off, thank God it's Friday. For everyone else, my condolences. Welcome to the show. Thank you again for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you this evening. I'll be talking to Nick here shortly. Nick grew up on a kind of a vacation property that him and his family used to go out to. And they had many different encounters out there, many different experiences out on that property. And he'll be sharing it with us tonight. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email, wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. And I really do appreciate you being here tonight. It's going to be a great night. I want to jump right into it tonight. I know Nick has a lot to share. Nick, thanks for coming on tonight, man. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, no problem, man. Thanks for getting in touch with me.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk with you. I know, your parents had this property, and there was a lot of different activity that went on and around this property. What state did this happen in, Nick?
I live in Ohio. This happened in the southeastern portion of Ohio, down near Wheeling, West Virginia.
So tell me about the property that you got your family had purchased. Before you jump into your encounter or your mom's encounter, tell me a little bit about the property, and did you start to notice anything strange before your encounters?
The property was purchased in 1978. So it's been in my family for a long time, and it's basically in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains. I know that a lot of people, when they think of Ohio, if you go out west, it's basically the start of the Great Plains. It's real flat, really open. But that portion of Ohio is really, by our terms here on the East Coast, pretty mountainous, and it's pretty remote. Actually, you really have to. You find a lot of little county roads, dirt roads and such, but there's not a lot of traffic that comes through that area. You have to drive 10 or 15 minutes to get to the nearest store. But we used it as a recreational property during the summer when I was a kid. We never had electricity down there until it would have been 2000 or 2001. So, we were tent camping down there, and then eventually my parents built a little, I guess you'd call, hunting shack. It was just big enough for my family to sleep in, but it was still, we didn't have any electricity. We hauled in our own water. It was pretty remote camping. Excuse me. Yeah, it was a lot of fun though. I mean, getting out in the woods, you had nothing else to do. We didn't have, PlayStations and Xboxes and computers and stuff. So, our vacations were spent down there, and I spent them playing in the woods. Got to know the property pretty well.
How big would you say the property is? How many acres is it sitting on?
It's 20 acres. We own 20 acres, and there's a lot of larger parcels around us. Our neighbor across the street has 100 acres, and it's just pretty, a lot of bigger parcels, I guess.
Yeah, so it's very, very remote when your parents bought it. Probably,
yeah, to
an extent, still is somewhat today. Probably not as much as back in 1978, but
no, I would say not. But there's only in our particular area, there's only a few more people that have moved in on the road. It's just a little gravel road. You wouldn't even really know that it's a road. It kind of looks like somebody's driveway, actually.
In the beginning, when you guys first moved there, and kind of in the early years, did you guys notice anything strange going on and around the property prior to actually seeing it?
In probably, and as far as a date, I couldn't give you an exact date, but my parents actually had a teepee. It was an actual teepee that you put the logs up, and they used to camp down there in that, and they did have something one night walk around their tent in the middle of the night and walk up the hill. And the weird part about it was barefoot tracks. It wasn't shoe prints. It looked like somebody in bare feet had walked in the snow around the teepee and up the hill. And that was the first time that my dad really told me that he thought that something was odd.
Yeah, especially in that location, I would imagine. Let's jump into your encounter, Nick, and then we can kind of come back to some of the other encounters. I know the BFRO has been out there. I know your mom has seen one. Friends of the family have seen them.
Yes.
But for the audience, tell us about the night of your encounter. What were you out doing? And then walk us right into it.
Sure. It was a Friday night, and it was I think the year was 2000, and I had attended a Cleveland Indians game with my girlfriend at the time. My parents were already down at this property. So after we attended the game, we made a stop off at the house and then drove from northeast Ohio down there, and about a 2-hour drive. And I arrived down there. I believe it was around 1 o'clock in the morning. So it was pretty late. My parents were already in bed. And so when I got down there, of course, we get out of the car and we parked in the driveway. I get out of the car to go get, I had a book bag with clothes and stuff in it, and something growled at me, and it was a growl that I've never heard before. I almost felt it more than I heard it. It was just a real low, guttural, nasty growl. Just made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. At that point, I got back in the car. To be honest with you, I had no idea what it was at that point. But it scared the crap out of me. I figured it was an animal or something like that, but I couldn't tell you at that time what I thought it was. I had no idea. I just knew that I got the impression that whatever it was telling me I was maybe too close to it, that I needed to step away, but I really had no place to go. We were, literally I was in the driveway. So I got back in my car and turned on the lights for a few minutes and sat there, with my girlfriend who heard it also. We were just shaking, I waited for at least 5 minutes, and while I was in the trunk, I recovered my book bag, and I was armed. You know, we like our Second Amendment, and also being in the woods. I mean, we usually kept a gun around. I mean, there's coyotes and animals and black bear and stuff like that down there. So I got back in the car and sat there for about 10 minutes trying to compose myself, and I loaded my revolver. I sat there. Like I said, it must have been about 5 minutes. And I couldn't tell you exactly how long it was. I was just scared. I wasn't really sure what to do. I wasn't sure whether I should start up the car and drive away, or just kind of hang around in there for a few minutes and let whatever was out there go away. You know, hope that it would go away. And after that time, I waited, and I got out of the car with my girlfriend, and we went to go to the little cabin that my parents were sleeping in, where we were going to stay for the night. There's no outdoor lighting. We didn't even have electricity down there at this time, so the only lights that we had were either propane lights or oil lights or something along those lines. So the only light I had was my flashlight. And when I rounded the corner of my cabin, we had a little patio area with a picnic table, and standing at the end of the patio was what I saw. It was really big. It was gray. It was brownish red in color. You know, it had like a brown color to it. I shined the flashlight right in its face. The eyes were, they weren't, I wouldn't say glowing, but they had like a reddish tinge to them. You know, like if you've ever, shined a flashlight in a deer's face, you see how they kind of glow, a little bit, but this had a reddish tinge to it. Scared me to death. I kind of froze for a second. It looked at me, and I looked at it, and I turned around. I kind of grabbed my girlfriend and threw her in the direction of the cabin, and we retreated into the cabin and woke my father up, and told him what had happened. And of course, he got up and he went back outside, and by the time he got outside, whatever was there was gone.
Yeah, that's terrifying. I know the growl that you're talking about. I definitely know that growl. People that hear, when you say a growl, they think of a normal animal, but it's very unnatural, the growl that you hear. It's enough. It shakes you up when you hear it. It really does shake you up.
Yeah, I've heard, like I said, this property has been in my family since 1978. I grew up down there. We would spend a week or two straight out there in the woods during the summer with, my father and I. He was an avid outdoorsman. I would like to think that I've heard a lot of what it could have been down there in the woods, but I've never heard it. Like I said, I felt it. It was almost like being in a concert and standing in front of the speakers. You feel it just as much as you hear it, and that was the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, you're right. It is just like that. It's exactly what it's like. Let me ask you, when you rounded the corner and you shined the flashlight in its face, were you able to get a good look at its face?
The distance was. I've been thinking about what the exact distance is, because it's probably, I was at a distance of about 3 car lengths. Would be how far I was away. I got a pretty good look at the face. There was most of it was covered in hair, kind of a long, shaggy hair, except for around the eyes that, like I said, were glowing. They look like, if you, like I said, you've been in the woods and you shine the flashlight. You've just been sitting out there, and you can turn on the flashlight. You can see. Eye shine from a long distance away. It almost glows. But this, like on deer and stuff, it's kind of white, almost yellow. But what I saw was red. I could see the nose. It was really wide, kind of flat. But that was about all of the facial features I could make out.
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. And you're not, a lot of times in those situations, you're first thought isn't, hey, let's really jot down some notes here. Your first thought is, I'm going to go the opposite way of wherever this thing's going.
Absolutely, and like I said, I was armed also, and I had to admit I didn't even think about shooting at it. That wasn't, I had the flight reaction instead of fight. I needed to put my distance between myself and it. It was way too close. It's different if you see something from a long distance away. But when you round a corner, in the woods at night, and you just got a flashlight on, when you round it, you see that, it's just the shock of it. I'd never even thought once about standing there to find out what it was going to do.
Yeah, I hear you. And, at that distance, 3 car lengths, you're talking, I've seen these things move. You're talking about a half a second they could be on top of you. And the red eyes scares you, man. The red eyes, I've been out in, I remember, I hate to even say this because I'll sound like a fool, but I was out on a farm one time, out on a recent activity on this farm, and I clicked on my flashlight, and I started scanning, and I hit a set of red eyes.
Oh, really?
And I stepped back. And then I started scanning, and I saw more red eyes, and it was the cows.
Oh,
their
really?
eyes were reflecting back. Yeah, their eyes were reflecting back red. It scared the crap out of me when I first saw it.
I can imagine.
I wasn't expecting. I've seen plenty of deer. I've seen plenty of cougar.
Yeah.
I've seen bear, but the cow. I'm not a farm boy, so the cows kind of.
Right. I'm not either. I live in the city. Believe it or not. I grew up, just south of Cleveland, and being out in the woods. I wasn't like a farm boy. I've never seen. We used to sit there at night with this real high-powered, spotlight. At the time, this was probably, 15 to 20 years ago. It wasn't. They didn't have the big LED lights like they do today. Something that's so small that you can see for a long distance. But we had a spotlight that you could plug in that recharged, and we'd sit out at the picnic table at night and just kind of sit there and talk and then turn on the spotlight to see what we could see as far as eyesight, animal-wise, deer, raccoon, and stuff like that. There's not a whole lot to do when you're in the middle of the woods and you can't sleep at night, or something like that. No electricity, no running water. We had to amuse ourselves in other ways, I guess.
This wasn't your first rodeo running into things. I wanted to ask you, how tall do you think the creature was compared to you?
To me, well, we were able to recreate the height because it was standing. If the following day we were able to figure out it was standing near a tree. It was it was skinny. In comparison, it's a small diameter tree, but I was able to figure out that we roughly about 8 feet tall is what we figured out, to the eye level of where it was standing when I saw it.
Did you notice anything about how it was proportioned?
The shoulders were very broad. I know that you hear that a lot, and I can't. It was proportioned like a human, just a lot bigger. That's the best way I can describe it. It reminded me in the head area where I saw it. You see people who are real strong. They don't really have a neck. You know what I mean? Yeah. Down below their head. It just was kind of like straight down into the shoulders and just very wide. And it was standing with its arms straight down. Just standing there looking at me. It wasn't doing anything like kneeling down or moving. It was just standing there. I think that's the part that scared me. I didn't hear it. I didn't see it. It was just all of a sudden there.
Yeah, those surprise ones will get you. Your mom's encounter, was that prior to this or was it after this?
That was after. That was after. It would have been, I don't know, 3 or 4 years later. After I had my encounter, we built a larger cabin down there. Literally, I think it was 2001. that we ran electricity to and such, so we could spend more time down there and do it a little bit more comfortably. It was just, we didn't mind the having the little hunting cabin, but we wanted to spend more time down there, and my parents' goal was to retire down there. That was the idea for the property. It would have been about 3 or 4 years later when my mom had her encounter.
Before we jump into your mom's encounter, now when you had your encounter, you run into the cabin, you wake your dad up. I would assume your mom wakes up. You tell them what you saw, and what's their reaction?
My mom kind of just sat there, and my dad immediately got up. He immediately got up out of bed and got a flashlight and got his handgun that he had next to the bed and went to the door. The cabin was very small. It had it was probably the size of what people would consider a storage shed. It wasn't very big. It didn't offer a lot of protection, so my dad's immediate reaction was to get up and arm himself to find out what was standing outside the cabin.
And you said he didn't find anything when he went out there. It was probably...
No, it was gone. It was gone. He as quick as he could get up and get shoes on and get to the door, it was gone. He didn't hear anything. He didn't see anything. It was just gone.
Yeah, the funny thing with these is they never just go in situations like that. It probably retreated back to where he couldn't see it, but I would assume that they probably hung around for a little bit to find out, and I'm just speculating.
That's very possible. That's very possible. Like I said, I mean, we didn't have very powerful flashlights, but, from what he could see within range of the flashlight, he couldn't see anything, and he didn't hear any movement or anything like that. It was a pretty quiet night, actually.
Well, tell me about your mom's encounter. What happened to your mom?
My mom's encounter is actually a little bit funny to me. And I spoke with her about this recently and talked with her a little bit so she could refresh my memory a little bit. We have an outhouse down there. We don't have running water. And we have electricity. We're putting stuff in a little bit at a time. We're getting a well done this year. But we still had an outdoor bathroom, and she had gotten up to go to the bathroom, and kind of nonchalantly, she rounded the corner heading towards the outhouse, and one walked by her. She literally kind of looked at it, and it walked by her at a distance of probably 15 feet. She was in shock. She just kind of stood there for a minute. She wasn't really awake, but to see that, and it was daylight outside. That was the interesting part about what happened with my mom. It was approximately 7 or 7:30 in the morning.
Did she describe to you what she saw?
Yeah, what she described was not as big. It was smaller, but it was proportioned a lot like what I saw. As far as being very wide in the shoulders. The big difference from what she told me was that this one was gray. It had almost like the color of ashes. It kind of had different colors of gray. That was the big difference. That's what she saw.
Yeah, and that's interesting that she mentions that particular color. Did she say anything about the face? Did she give you any other details?
It was walking in the opposite direction from her. Okay, if she's walking one direction, it was walking off to her right at a very rapid pace. So she didn't get to see the front of it as much, but she saw the back side and was able to get a guesstimate of how tall it was.
And how tall did she say it was?
Between 6 and 7 feet.
I got you.
Is what we figured out.
Well, God bless your mother, man. I don't know too many women that if I said, hey, I have a cabin, and by the way, there's no electricity, and there's an outhouse, I don't know too many women that would, maybe it's me. Maybe it's not the cabin.
Wes, you would have to meet my mom. She's an amazing woman. She was born in a cabin in Kentucky. she's well, I like to joke with her and call her a hillbilly, but she prefers to be called an Appalachian American. Right down to the southern draw. She's just a little fiery old hillbilly woman, and I love her to death. But she is actually living down there right now. My father passed away, and my mom was able to retire and has since moved down there. That's where she's living now.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. God bless your mom, though. She sounds like a tough old lady. So you guys had this. She had this sighting. You had your sighting. And at what point do you guys decide? Well, let's back up. So you guys have friends and family that come out. What happened when friends and family came out? What kind of encounters and experiences went on when people would show up?
Starting in probably the early 90s. My parents every Memorial Day would have a party down there, and it was a big camp out. And we would invite. We've had as many as I would say 25 to 30 people down there. And at this time, it was all tent camping. We had our little cabin that we had built, just big enough for 4 people to sleep in. But everything we would camp outside. Everybody would pitch tents, and it was around that time when my parents started doing that people started having weird things happen to them. We all got woke up one night, and like I said, there was probably 15 people by a howling and a screaming that it woke everybody up. There was, when we talked to everybody who was there, everybody heard it, and it was just a loud screaming, and it just didn't sound right. But it started off with stuff like that, and one of my parents' younger sons, he was about 17 years old, 18 years old at the time, said that he saw one when he had gone to his mother's van to get a jacket out of it. So that, it was around that time that I guess we started paying a little bit more attention to what was going on. There was a series of events that led us to, just people that would come down there, and it wasn't something that we broadcast. When you're really the first person that I've felt confident in opening up to and talking about it, without really knowing well first.
Yeah, I appreciate
you
that.
know what I mean? I didn't. We as a family didn't feel comfortable just walking around going, yeah, we've heard Bigfoot, we've seen him, but just for the ridicule, I guess. We knew what was going on, and I guess we understood what was going on and didn't really feel the need to disclose that. But the parts that were interesting was that these people knew nothing about what had gone down in the past, that had experiences. They had just come down there, to visit, on a holiday weekend, pretty much.
Yeah, and that's interesting. So the people, like the kid that saw one, comes back and I would assume tells everyone. Yeah. What's kind of the reaction of the group?
I remember it, and I was there. I was there for most of what happened prior to me, seeing it. We were just sitting around the campfire. That was all we had to do. And we were just kind of sitting there and talking, and he came running up to my mom, and he says, I just saw something. And, the whole reason he had gone to the van was to get his mom's jacket. And of course he returned without the jacket. So my mom was like, look, Andy, I'll walk with you. Come on, let's go over there. He's like, Aunt Helen, I'm not going over there. There's nothing you could say or do right now to convince me to go back over there. So, he described to, my father and his father what he had seen, and they went down there. But by the time they got down there, they could see it was the van was parked in a field kind of across from our cabin. I haven't really described what the property's like. It actually sits like in a saddle. If you're at the road and you're looking at it, there's a bigger mountain to the left, a mountain to the right, and a mountain in the back with through the valley runs a natural spring-fed creek. And if you go across the gravel road where our property is, there's a big open field over there, kind of swampy area. And that's where he saw what he just described, something stand up out of the weeds in the field and take off running up the hill on two legs. That's what he saw.
Yeah, that would terrify just about anyone, especially when you're not expecting it. Most encounters, you're really not expecting it anyways. I wanted to ask you, when you guys were out there, beyond screaming, what other sounds did you hear that you could attribute to these things that wasn't natural, wasn't a deer, wasn't a fox, wasn't a coyote? What kind of sounds did you hear out there besides screaming and the hollering that one night?
There were smells and odors that you'd just be sitting, and all of a sudden a smell of it's kind of hard to describe it. It's like a cross between skunk and roadkill, and just about every other nasty odor that you can think of would just hit you like a wall and then go away. That happened multiple times to my family down there. We would hear odd things, and at the time we knew nothing about today what I guess is called wood knocking. We knew nothing about that, but you would be in the middle of the night. It would sound like somebody would be out in the woods with an axe chopping on trees. And my dad made the comment one time, now who in the hell would be outside in the middle of the night chopping down a tree with an axe? It's stuff like that, just odd stuff. A lot of times the vocal stuff, we would hear weird sounds, that you couldn't really, what a coyote sounds like, you know what, other animals sound like in the woods, but it would be just a scream. I mean, I guess the closest thing to what I've heard, like today, is since I've started, I guess, looking into this stuff now. I mean, it kind of pointed me in that direction. Would be the Ohio howl, if you've ever heard that recording.
Kind of like this.
Yeah, except a lot louder. The Ohio howl is kind of, it's distant, you can tell that it's at a distance. What we were hearing was a lot closer to us, and it would last for 10 minutes at a time, and it would come from different directions, but it was always up the valley, away from our cabin, up towards the source of where the natural spring creek is that we have there. It was just back in the valley, and you could hear it echoing off the valleys. It was amazing to hear.
What did your dad, I think I've read some reports, and I could be wrong, I think that your dad submitted, but did your dad ever go around to any of the neighbors and just say, hey, what the hell's going on out here?
Yeah. We have two people that we knew pretty well down there. There wasn't a lot of other neighbors, believe it. I mean, it's very remote. There were the neighbors across the street from us that owned 100 acres. They said that back in the mid 80s, it was like 85 or 86, that a hunter got ran out of their property by one. Literally chased out of the woods during deer season, all the way back out of the property. It was an oil well access road. We have a lot of those down there, you know, where they put up the oil pumps, you know, and the oil company still has to get at them. They're usually like at top of mountains or whatever. But there's a lot of those access driveways down there, and people use them to, you know, get back into the woods to hunt and do stuff like that. And it chased him out to his car, and he got in his car and left.
So the neighbors were pretty open to it then.
Yeah, it just seemed like that area had a lot of weird stuff going on. And as far as like to the neighbors down there, we would talk about it. I believe that, you know, there's been something going on down there for a long time. You know, we weren't the only ones that were experiencing the weird stuff. You know, the people who live down there on a daily basis, or spend more time down there than us had stuff going on, you know, so I guess it kind of made us feel a little better, you know, like we weren't crazy, you know, it's like chasing monsters in the woods type of thing, you know. But yeah, I mean, other people had weird experiences down there in the general vicinity of where our property is.
Yeah, I've read some of the reports online. There was one, I don't know if you can tell me more about it or not. I kind of think your dad wrote this report. I could be wrong. But a lady stepped out of the cabin, started walking towards her car or towards her truck, screamed. Everyone came rushing out of the cabin, and she said she saw a white one. Can you tell us that story? What happened with that?
Yeah.
And who was that? Was it just a family friend?
It was the wife of a gentleman that my father worked with. We were down there as you know, on a weekend, you know, just kind of hanging out, playing music, just hanging out. And he invited him to come down because he wanted to possibly do some hunting, and he wanted to sight in a rifle that he had. And so my dad invited him down, and towards the evening, it was probably 6 or 6:30. It had started getting dark, but it wasn't, you know, totally dark yet, from what I remember. But she had gone to walk out to her vehicle where we park. You know, on the driveway, we have some spots that we've, you know, cleared in the woods as like parking spaces because we get a lot of people down there, a lot of cars. And when she exited the cabin, she walked about 10 feet and towards where my father's truck was parked. In the general area of where I had my sighting, and there was one standing there that she described as white or gray, from what I remember. She screamed. It was scared the shit out of us. You know, we were just kind of, the door was open. We were just kind of hanging around, and, you know, she screamed at the top of her lungs like a bloody, like, we thought somebody had grabbed her or something, and so we all went running out there, and she was hyperventilating, from what I could remember. And it took her a while before she could even tell us what happened. She refused. After that point, she refused. They would come down and visit, but when the evening part, when night came around, they would actually drive 15 miles into town and get a motel room. She would not actually stay there at night after that.
Yeah, I don't blame her. Now
I don't either.
Now the BFRO came out. What did they find?
The BFRO was out to our place multiple times. Our property is in the general vicinity of Salt Fort State Park, and a lot of people will probably, if they are from the area, are familiar with that park. And they have the Ohio Bigfoot Conference there every year. And one year my father decided to attend it and spoke with some researchers who then came out to our property and spent some time there doing some research, reporting on it, you know, trying to make contact and stuff like that.
When they came out, what did they find, or what was their conclusion?
Their conclusion to us was that we absolutely had activity going on our property. They spent time down there. We're talking weeks. You know, they would stay a week at a time, and they had stuff happen to them. They heard the howls. They had the wood knocking. There were tracks found. So they did kind of a longer term investigation at our property, and came to the conclusion that there was absolutely no reason to believe that what we were telling wasn't the truth. That it was definitely possible, and from what they believed, that we were telling the truth to them.
How is the area for tracks?
When you get down in the creek area, there's when it levels up, obviously it's got sandy sides to it. So you can see tracks down in there, alongside of the roads, usually really good. But other than that, it's pretty hard to get tracks. It's pretty hard to get tracks in that area. It's not a lot of open forest floor, I guess it would be the best way to put it. It's pretty hard, pretty compact. There are some swampier areas, but they're really hard to get into.
I wanted to ask you, in the situation that you're in, it's kind of interesting that it's a vacation home.
Yeah.
And it makes you wonder if they're there constantly, and then when you guys show up, they kind of come in to check things out. Your mom being there, has she noticed anything?
Well, modern technology has allowed my mom to be able to watch TV and receive phone calls, and so she hasn't heard as much stuff as we used to hear. When we were down there in the past, I guess we were a little bit more connected to nature, being that we didn't have electricity. There wasn't really any place to hang out inside. We were always outside, but she's heard some weird screams and stuff outside at night when she's gone to the outhouse that we have down there. So, but other than that, she hasn't really said too much.
I wanted to ask you, there's something I always ask researchers, and I really should be asking witnesses, because all
Sure.
a researcher is just someone who had an encounter and has a little self-entitlement. But
Right.
I wanted to ask you, you've seen them. You're looking into this now. I realize you guys haven't had any real aggressive type encounters out there, which is a good thing.
Right.
There's probably enough space between you and them, and it's more or less just curiosity checking you guys out. The night that you saw them, what do you think they are? I
think it's a big animal. I got just my personal opinion is it's a large animal that's living in the woods that people don't really come in contact with too often. They're probably a little bit more intelligent than a regular animal. I don't think they're human, but my opinion would be that it would just be a very large animal. There was nothing that would tell me otherwise.
Yeah, especially when you hear the growl. The growl is the key. A lot of people, they have this debate whether they're human or not. And my first response to that is, well, listen to one of them growl and tell me that's human. It's nothing close to human.
Right. I've never heard anything like it. In the years that since then, it's been 15 or 16 years now, and I've searched, trying to find this sound, trying to find, what animal could have made the sound, and I haven't been able to find it. I wish I could. I wish I could say, yeah, it was just a bear or something, but I don't know. Like I said, the depth of it, it's just like it's hard to explain. It's like getting kicked in the chest.
It's really hard to explain. The only thing I've come close to the sound, the actual sound, is a gator. Gators actually growl, believe it or not, but they don't have the volume that these things put off.
Right. I play music, and I've been to a lot of concerts, and it's almost like standing in front of a speaker when somebody's hitting a kick drum. You feel it in your chest. It is. Yeah. It's just hard to describe. You're hearing it, but you're feeling it at the same time, and it's just you know that whatever is doing that you've never heard before.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
That's the scary part. Right. And to be at, you know, I've heard you talk about your encounter. I got to be honest with you, man. I was a little bit leery going out into the woods for a while after that happened. I mean, you know, when people are talking about, yeah, you know, this happened to me, or you've been around when you've heard something or something like that, but to actually walk up on one in the woods in the middle of the night I can't even describe it. I had trouble going outside at night for a while down there. You know, it just felt like, you know, the eyes had woods, you know, the woods had eyes. Everything was watching you, you know. I applaud you for going back out and doing what you do, man, because I tell you what, to have an experience like that and then to continue to do what you do, you're a better man than I am.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't go that far. I appreciate the kind words, but to be honest with you, man, I'm just as terrified going out there
right.
as most people. They don't realize how terrified I am. I'm absolutely terrified going out there, and unless I have
right.
The only night that I really wasn't terrified was the night I had both my brothers, and they both had you know AR-15s.
Absolutely.
I thought, well, if there's a fight, we got a chance. These things terrify me, and I want to share my terror with the world. You know, and it's a shame. I know you and I talked about possibility of shooting one, and I know a lot of people are against that. And I know in the situation that you're in, it really wasn't an aggressive, you know, seeing them scary, hearing them growl scary, but for the most part, they weren't manhandling you guys. They weren't really knocking the shack over for you guys to leave.
Well, we talked to the researchers about that. You know, we brought it up. You know, of course, one of the questions you're going to ask if you've got something going on like that is, are we safe? You know, I mean, for me, you know, obviously I was scared to death. You know, we contacted the researcher who came out the next day, and I asked him, you know, flat out. I said, "Are we safe?" And his reply was, "It seems like the animals that we deal with up north seem to be a little bit more or like less aggressive than what goes on maybe out in the west or what goes on in the south. I'm sure that there are aggressive ones. I'm just like animals, you know. I'm sure that there are animals of the same species act differently as far as aggression in different areas of the country, I would suppose. But yeah, I mean, I didn't, it didn't charge me. I never had the feeling like it was going to charge me. It was just kind of standing there looking at me, you know. But like I said, I didn't stick around for too long after that to find out.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder in your own encounter, there was probably two, one growling at you, and then one around the corner.
I think I tried to describe to you, like, if the car was in the center of a clock, the growl happened from behind me at 6 o'clock. It would have been to the rear of the car. And what I saw was out to the left of the car, at maybe like 10 or 11 o'clock. So it was in two different areas, you know, from where I heard whatever growled at me to what I saw, it was in different areas. It's very possible there could have been more than one. I mean, just kind of thinking about it, I think that, you know, obviously it's not normal to have people pulling in and out of our driveway down there at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning. And I think they had kind of come in to maybe check out what my parents were up to, who were already down there and who had already been sleeping for a few hours by the time I got down there. And I kind of just pulled up into the drive, you know, into the middle of when they were doing that is the impression that I got.
Yeah, I tend to agree. You probably stumbled right into them by mistake.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear a lot of people say that you don't see them unless they make a mistake, or, you know, or something along those lines, or you don't see them unless they want to be seen. I honestly think that I just kind of rolled up on these guys, or whatever they were. in the middle of the night. They just didn't expect me to be there at that time, being creatures of habit. That's not normal for people to be driving up into the woods at that time of night in that area. So that was kind of what I got the impression. And we kind of felt that it was more, the stuff that was going on was curious, kind of curiosity, checking out what we were doing, maybe trying to get reactions out of us, They were never aggressive towards us, but, when they were seen, obviously people didn't really stand around to ask, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah,
nobody was trying to feed him an apple and pet him on the head.
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that. I mean, man, I know what I saw. It's something that's going to probably, I'm sure, stay with me the rest of my life. And the thought of like going out there, kind of harrying the Hendersons and hanging out with them, I don't think is really realistic.
Yeah, no, I tend to agree with you. I wanted to ask you, and I'm sorry to hear about your dad passing away.
Sure.
Your dad, though, what was his take on the whole thing? He sounds kind of like a hardened, tough country boy that was out there. What was his take on it? He always wanted to see one. He was a little different from me or the other people in my family. Is that he had stuff happen where he would hear something or he would smell something or he'd find a track in the woods when he was out there, and he was more curious than the rest of us as to what the heck it was, because he knew that whatever it was wasn't something normal that he could account for. I mean, we've seen bear tracks down there. If you've ever seen a bear track, like their rear legs kind of overlap the front track, and it'll almost look like a footprint. I mean, we've been in the woods, we've seen the stuff that he saw and heard. It just made him question what it was. So he was definitely more curious. Well, and it's a shame that he never got to see one. That's a shame that he. It sounds like that's what he wanted, was to see one. Everyone else in the family has seen it. Family, friends have seen it.
Right. Well, and that was exactly it too. It seemed like the one person who would have probably been more curious and maybe had a little bit more guts if he came across it was the only one who didn't. It was always it was just, I don't want to call it inopportune times, but it was real. It happened at surprising moments. It wasn't like, mine was preceded with a growl, right? I heard the growl. I knew something was around, but, the boy that saw the one across, in the field, he was just walking down to the van, and it just kind of got up out of the grass and took off running up the field. He was curious. All of the stuff that had gone on down there over the years, and he wanted to see one and never got to. So,
what other stories do you have from that property that you'd like to share?
I've had a couple of other things happen. I had one instance where I heard the wood knocking in the woods in the middle of the night. Where you would hear two knocks coming from one hill, and then you would hear one or two knocks in reply from another direction. And the weird part about that was I was sitting outside by myself, and we were having a party, and my dad had a smoker going, so I was keeping it going, and it was throughout the night. And my mom actually came out, and I said, "Hey, do you hear this? Do you hear what I'm hearing?" And she heard the knocks and the replies. We had experiences like that multiple times, but the majority of it was a lot of loud screams. As I remember, my parents' friends had put a RV, like a camper, down there, and would go spend time down there and kind of vacation down there like they did, the family friends. And they had something, the spare tire rack on the back side of their RV was swung open. It was open because my dad's friend had been working on it, and they had gone inside the RV, and something slammed the spare tire holder into the back of the RV so hard that it knocked stuff off the tables on the inside of it. There was that was one that sticks out in my head because it scared the living daylights out of them. It knocked the coffee cup that they had sitting on the table off onto the floor. Whatever hit it was big. It dented, just you ever seen them? They kind of swing back out. They latch onto the back of them. It had been slammed into the RV and actually dented the latching mechanism that locked it in place. It was slammed that hard.
Yeah, and those things are heavy. Those things are heavy to.
Yeah, they are. That was a big spare tire.
Yeah, I can imagine.
That was a big spare tire for an RV. So, but we kind of just accepted it. We kind of accepted that there was going to be weird stuff that went on down there. I had a friend about 4 years ago. It was real funny because, like I said, I don't tell people about this. I don't sit around and talk to my friends and be like, hey, I saw a Bigfoot, ha ha ha. And especially today in the era of finding Bigfoot, stuff like that, everybody knows about Bigfoot, and it's not as much that I'm worried about ridicule now as I don't want a whole bunch of people running around in my woods with high-powered rifles trying to shoot one, but it was, 10, 11 o'clock at night, he had gone outside to relieve himself, and something ran behind him. It was 3 big steps that he could feel at his feet, wham, 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 and it was gone. He heard it breaking through the brush. But, that's about all I can remember. It just went on for a long period of time. The investigators were down there as recently as last year. It would have been last summer. They came and to kind of check in with us and see what was going on and spent the night down there. And, I guess we're just open to it. We just kind of accept that there's something down there and we kind of know what it is. But like I said, the thought of people running around in the woods with high-powered rifles trying to kill one down there, especially due to the fact that my mother's living down there now, I wouldn't want anything like that going on,
And I agree with you on that. I'm of the opinion that one has to be shot, period. It has to be done. The only exception to that rule is if people have them on their property. Because the moment you take a shot, now that person has to deal with your actions. There's a consequence to your actions.
Right.
And it's not on you, it's on that person living on that property. And that's the only time I would advocate not shooting one is if people have them on their property because you don't know what they're going to do. These things seem to have a retaliate.
Hold a grudge.
Seem to be, hold a grudge. And so that's the only time I would advise people not to shoot is if they have them on their property.
I would agree. And I unfortunately, as far as me, I know what I saw. I believe that they exist. I saw one. I walked up to one a lot closer than I probably would have wanted to. I've got nothing to prove. I don't need to shoot one and don't look to do it. But I agree with you, though, that eventually it's just going to have to be done to prove that they exist. I don't think that any amount of evidence of as many sightings as you have, as many videos as you see or tracks that you see, it doesn't, science is not going to accept it until they have a specimen, unfortunately.
Yeah, and it is a shame, really, that, I even have to talk about shooting one because I think any other animal on this planet, if I said, here's a bunch of tracks to science, or, hey, here's a ton of witnesses, are all describing the exact same thing.
Right.
or here's some hair samples, or here's some. I think science, for the most part, would buy into the fact that it's a known animal, or they would classify it,
or at least
in
try.
this situation, or at least try. Yeah, at least try. I think in this situation, and believe me, there is a lot of scientists that are into this off the record,
right,
and are very interested in this off the record.
Right.
On the record, they'll tell you it doesn't exist.
Right.
Off the record, they're fascinated by it. And so I think there's this mentality of, like you said, it doesn't matter how much. Yeah, I could bring forth the best video. I could show one drooling,
right,
and people are going to say I'm a CGI master
you
and I
faked
hoaxed it.
right?
And, yeah, I faked it, and so I don't think video's going to do it. I don't think anything else is going to do it besides a body. Period. That's the only way it's.
I would agree with you. I would agree. Unfortunate, and like I say, unfortunate because it's they weren't really aggressive to us. Now, I'm not saying that we wouldn't defend ourselves if we needed to, or at least try. We definitely have the means to do so. But to me, going out and hunting it would not be the solution for my problems down there, as far as seeing them and stuff like that. And with the duration of time that we had activity going on down there, you would think that there's more than one, or is it a family that stay in the same area? If we go out there and pluck one out of them, how are they going to react to it? I wouldn't suggest it, but I also would defend myself if I needed to. You know what I mean? The night that I saw mine, I just didn't have. That wasn't the first thing that popped into my mind. It was, I was even armed, and taking a shot at it was not the first thing that came to mind. It was kind of get the heck out of the area as quick as I could.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I understand that. That's not your mindset. That's not where your mind's going. A lot of times people who have surprise encounters and have a gun in their hand, the first thing they'll tell you is, I forgot I even had a gun in my hand. I just wanted to leave. I didn't want to be there anymore. And so, yeah, I get that. I completely understand that.
I guess my biggest curiosity that I have, that our family has talked about is the how they act in different areas. Like up here, I'm sure that there are aggressive ones here. Just like anything else, but these seem to, they didn't like show aggressiveness. They were just kind of like, hey, we're here, and then they were gone. We had the back of the camper, with the spare tires slammed, but other than that, other than the visual sightings and hearing them, they never really kind of presented themselves as being aggressive towards us. We always got the impression that we kind of either snuck up on them, not really snuck up on them, like they knew we were there, but we kind of did something they didn't expect us to do, and kind of caught them off balance. But that was our opinion, we never saw them where they were like knelt down behind a rock or, hiding behind something and peeking out. When we saw them, it was almost like they wanted us to see them, or it was an accident. That's the only two things that we could, it wasn't like they were trying to hide from us.
I've talked to other witnesses in the situation that you're in, and I get it. I mean, if they're cool, I'll be cool. Right. The moment they're not cool, I won't be cool.
Right.
And so, I mean, I get what you're saying. It's just frustrating that I just wish they'd classify the damn thing. Just classify it. Say it's out there. Say you might run into it. People need to be wary. They can be aggressive. Are they always going to rip your head off and eat you?
Right.
No. Does that go on? Yes.
Yes.
And I wish they would just classify it, and so there wouldn't be a need to shoot one. Because in the situation that you're in, Nick, and your family was in, it really does sound more like a simple curiosity than it does really. Trust me, if they wanted you the night you shine the light in that one's eyes, in a matter of a split second, he would have been on top of you. There's
no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. The size of the thing, there wouldn't have been nothing I could have done. Just just by its size. I mean, I think about it, I almost stutter a little bit. You know, it was huge. It was absolutely huge, and even being inside the cabin, I didn't feel very very safe. You know, like there wasn't really any place that I could go that it couldn't have gotten me if it really put its mind to it. You know, I don't know. I'm curious now. You know, it's kind of, what were they up to? You know, were there multiple ones? I only saw one, but obviously I heard one in a different direction. And other times, you know, you hear things where you hear yells from different directions. So we figured there was more than one. But, you know, how many of them were there? You know, if I saw the one, you know, were there 3 or 4 in opposite places, kind of watching what I was doing, you know, I would have had no way to know, you know.
Well, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show, Nick, and sharing it. I know it wasn't easy. I appreciate and I respect the fact that, you know, you gave me the nice words and the credit and the honor to talk with you. And I really do appreciate you coming on and sharing everything. I really do.
Well, thank you for doing what you do and getting this out there, because I'm sure there's more people like me that have had stuff that's gone on that haven't been willing to talk about it, and maybe hearing other people talking about it will give them the confidence to talk to somebody about it, and it may be one of those people that'll help us find one and be able to get it classified and prove to the world stuff that you and I already know that they exist.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Hey, thank you very much. Thank you.
And that's Nick, everyone. Nick, thanks for coming on the show. I want to thank the audience for taking the time to listen tonight. And remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. Wes at SasquatchChronicles.com. Have a good night, everyone. I'll see you back on Sunday.